Here we go. Hi, I'm Kevin Ryan here. This is August 4th, 2020. I'm here with Tom and Barbara. Tom Ryan Remembers, and today's topic is pets. And pets, Tom, as a kid, you had one pet only?
Well,
Did you have?
as I said, I was an only child most of the time for about 7 years. And I always wanted a pet, of course, kids always do. But my parents were always against it. I don't remember the reasons why. There's a lot of care that goes into having a pet. And I guess they just didn't want to have one. And a lot of people did. It was a common thing to have a pet. And they grew up on farms, so they had a lot of animals around, but there was room for them. And they felt that I think pets were for the farm and not for the city. Anyway, we didn't have a pet, but I did when I was carrying papers. I was probably 12 years old. We found out there was a place people would raise rabbits, and then like you'd raise chickens, and they'd eat the rabbits. It was a way to improve their diet, and they'd have them in cages. And this rabbit farm, in a sense, was in a private home, and it was near Wisconsin Avenue, and we rode out there on bicycles, and we paid 35 cents for a baby rabbit. And
it's okay.
And then we brought the rabbit home, and my folks said I could have it. And we did have a cage. I don't know where the cage came from, but it was about 3 by 3 by 3 cube, and chicken wire on it. And I put the rabbit in that cage. And then it was so cold, and that little bunny was so small. It was about as little bigger than your fist. And so I put a light bulb in the cage and put it down where the bunny could cuddle up to the light bulb and get some warmth. Well, the bunny did, but bunny overdid it, and it kind of scorched the side of the bunny's white fur, and it made a big white circle on the side of the little bunny. And otherwise, bunny seemed to be uninjured. So I named the bunny Sunshine because it had a sunshine on the side. And I remember singing, "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine," to this bunny rabbit. And it grew and grew, and I fed it every day. And my parents said, if you're going to have a pet, you got to take care of it. It's your job. So I make sure I go out and I would cut clover, and bunny seemed to like grass with clover, and I would feed the bunny. But we got rabbit pellets. They were little pellets we could buy in a pet store, and most of the time we pet the pellets. But yeah, I enjoyed that rabbit, and I learned how to be responsible and take care of a pet, and I thought that was a learning experience.
How long did you have it?
Well, probably over a year, but they get pretty big pretty fast, and then I'd let the rabbit out of the cage, and the rabbit would run around the yard and eat the grass for a while, and I have to stay there and watch the rabbit. But most of the time, the rabbit was in the cage. I didn't want it to run away, and that would be, it'd end up starving to death. It wasn't able to feed itself. But I not more than a year, because I don't remember.
So how did it end? Did you have rabbit stew at the end?
Yes, we actually did.
Oh my God.
You would think, how could I eat a rabbit? Well, my parents convinced me that they didn't say anything about this, but they had the idea that that's what you did with animals on the farm. And one of the things I know they reminded me, but on the farm, if you gave an animal a name, then you couldn't eat it. And if the animals that you were going to eat, you didn't ever give them a name. You don't get that connected with them. Well, I don't know what got into me that this man down the street, he also had rabbits, and he agreed to kill the rabbit and skin the rabbit and show me how they skinned them, and then we ate the rabbit.
Uh-huh.
That says most people. I wasn't going to even tell that because most people, and it was kind of terrible. But I thought, what else are we going to do? We can't just throw it away. I mean, we could have killed the rabbit and not eaten it, but it just seemed that'd be a waste. And so we had I had a discussion with myself over that.
Yeah, this was like the early 40s, right?
Yeah, right. And people were short of meat. That's why they raised the rabbits. People raised chickens too in the backyard of their houses, and then the rooster would crow in the morning. It was these people weren't too far from the farm.
Did anybody have any unusual pets when you were a kid? Anybody, snake or anything?
My sisters didn't have pets. My parents, that was the only pet we had growing up was the rabbit. So I kind of continued that. I thought we traveled a lot when you were kids, and that was kind of the excuse why we didn't think you should have a pet, because who would take care of it while we were on vacation? We couldn't keep the pet.
We did have some parakeets when we were kids.
Yeah, parakeets. That was for a little while.
Can I tell a parakeet
story?
Yeah,
parakeets. Yeah.
We didn't have pets either growing up in Chicago, but we did have a parakeet, and can't remember the parakeet's name, but we did teach him to speak. And the name of our church was Salem Evangelical Church.
Uh-huh.
So we taught him to say, Salem Evangelical, Salem Evangelical. And then this is kind of a time when my father was delving into political ideas quite a bit. So he taught him to say dialectical materialism.
Well,
wow.
Smart birds. Yeah.
Timmy, that was his name, Timmy.
Okay. Well, cool.
That's all I have to say about Timmy.
Yeah. And Barbara lived in the pastor's house next to the church. Her father was a minister. Uh-huh. So I didn't know about that.
We lived in the second floor. Dad's office was on the first floor. And then there was an attic. Most Chicago houses were 3 stories. Yeah. And then there was the basement underneath where the coal cellar was. So that was our house.
Cool.
In Chicago.
Yeah.
So we lived in Waukegan. But Barbara and I didn't know each other then.
Yeah. So we had also a couple of dogs. We moved into a house that had a dog with it, a beagle.
That's right. We bought the house at 29 Southwest, and that was only a block from Larkin High School where I taught. And it was just the ideal house. Grandma helped us with $5,000 she lent to us. We paid her back, and we bought this beautiful home. And it was big enough for all 7 of us, and it was a very nice home. But the landlady had lost her husband, and she was moving to Florida, and she had this dog. It really belonged to her husband, who was a hunter, and the dog was very old. The husband had died, and she wondered if we would keep the dog for her so she didn't have to deal with it. Yeah. And so we agreed that we would do that. So the dog was so old, and I was afraid it would be cranky and bite, so we didn't really have the dog very long.
The dog's name was Bonnie, and she had a pen outside in the garage, and it had a door outside to the backyard. So she was kind of, all we had to do was feed her once a day or twice a day.
Yeah, she could get into the garage for shelter in the cold, and then go out through a little doggy door out the back.
Yeah. But at the same time, at the same time, we got that Pekinese from
Right.
your
Then we had the
friends.
gift from the Rogoffs. Hal and Sally Rogoff became very good friends, and they didn't have any children, and they loved these Pekingese dogs that they had, and they had an extra one somehow, and they gave the dog to us. They thought the dog would be good with you kids, and
I
she
can't,
was.
I can't
But
remember her name. I think the name was something like Chop Suey or something.
yeah, it was a very short time, and the dog got an injured eye. And you know, Pekingese have kind of protruding eyes, and one eye got injured, and we didn't know how, and we took it to the vet, and the vet said the dog can't see out of that eye, and I think you ought to put the pet down. It isn't fair to have the dog half blind, and so we agreed with the vet. And when the Rogoffs heard that, they were really disappointed. We were too. We enjoyed the dog, but it was a very short time. And it would have been a problem with that. Although I think when they came along and gave us the dog, we were kind of through with camping and going on long camping trips every summer.
Right.
And we could have kept the dog all right, but that injury interfered. So you kids always were wanting a pet, and just like my parents, I said it's just too much trouble with all of our traveling. And
So yeah, the two dogs were before Boulder, but after Boulder, we got a couple of cats.
that's right.
Yeah.
And yeah, the two cats, and we named them. You named them, you kids, Simon and Garfunkle, which were a pair of musicians that used to sing folk songs during that era.
Yeah,
And
one was a seal point, the other was a gray point. They were Siamese cats.
Siamese cats, right? Oh yeah, and then we'd talk about how they walked the walls in the Siam, and they were watchdogs, kind of like watch cats, and they would warn people that somebody was
Anyway,
trying to
so
get into their house.
you got a bad case of asthma, right?
That's right. Oh, my asthma came back. I hadn't had it since I was 16, and it was terrible. And so I went to the doctor, and of course he couldn't. There wasn't a lot of good medicine for it. They would give you a breathing medicine that would help temporarily, but it didn't. There wasn't any pop a pill and it was fixed. So he couldn't find out really what had caused it. So he said he went to a dermatologist, I think it was. Anyway, this doctor did tests on my back, my bare back, and they took needles and they stuck me in the back in a kind of checkerboard affair. And on these little needles were samples of different animals. And when I came home from the doctor, it said, well, kids, we found out what caused the asthma. This one spot on my back blazed up into a, flared up, and the doctor said, we have it, it's cats. And he said, that's not unusual. A lot of people are allergic to cats. And so I went home and I said, I got good news and bad news. Good news, they found it's the cats that are causing my asthma, and we have to get rid of the cats. And Kevin says, well, it was nice knowing you, Dad. He was about 16 and real wise at it. And he said, well, it was nice knowing you, Dad, that they'd get rid of Dad and then they could keep the cats. No,
Yeah.
we got rid of the cats. We gave them away. We found a good home for
The
both of them.
Zieglers.
You can skin them and eat them like
No, I didn't do that. You wouldn't eat a cat anyway. The cats weren't good eating. I didn't want to include that story about eating.
Yeah,
But I did it. I did that. I don't know. I was only like 12 years old.
the Zieglers ended up with the cats. They took both of them, and they lived out west of Elgin in really big, I don't know, a couple acres or 3 acres of land. So the cats had the run of the place.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, they had a really fast running road, cars running at 50 miles an hour or so. And I think eventually both cats got run over.
yeah, they didn't know about cars.
Yeah.
But cats like being outside, and they'd come home at night. I mean, they didn't run away. They knew where their meals were coming from. They're pretty independent animals. You can hold on to them with food, but they
Yeah.
don't.
And that was
They're not very.
the last of the pets until all the kids left the house, and or maybe Ginger was still there. But you got Linzy, right?
Yeah, right. Well, Chrissy, our granddaughter, Marie's daughter, Christina, came to live with us, and she uh, had called on the phone and she said, "Can I come and live with you?" And Marilyn said, "Sure, come on, Chrissy." And so she came out, and she was a teenager, and she'd gone through a lot of troubles with her stepfather. And so she and Marilyn, of course, are very close, especially. And Ida was too with Chrissy. She was a wonderful, we called her our fifth child, but she came after you kids had all left.
Did she get the
And
dog?
yeah, and she wanted a pet. Of course, they always had a pet when she was growing up. So there was an ad in the paper for how did it? The newspaper want ad said I needed a nice owner or something like that. So that Marilyn and Chrissy went to answer the ad, and I think they paid $50, something like that, for Linzy, and they brought her home and named her. And I wasn't going to have anything to do with Linzy. I mean, that you picked the Linzy out, you paid for it, it's your dog. Oh, but I would take her for a walk every morning, and as she grew up, she turned out to be a sheepdog. Uh, Australian sheepdog, and she was a mixture, of course, not really pure of anything. And we she got to be 60 pounds, so she was a pretty hefty dog. And I'd take her out to walk every morning. And when I was on the computer, I remember that's the first thing I did. I got up and went to the computer, and the dog would finally come and put her nose under my elbow and give it a shout. And my elbow would go up in the air, and she wanted to go for a walk. And
So
so
can you see the
we
picture?
would go for a walk. There, yeah, there she is.
You can see the picture.
Oh,
Okay. Yeah.
I got so attached to her. I never could understand people mourning a dog when the dog died, but I did with Linzy. It was a real loss. And we walked every morning. Out behind the house was open land, and she didn't need to be on a leash, and she would run. And I'd put the leash around my neck, just letting it hang around my neck. And then if anybody, a person came, I would run up to Linzy, or I'd call her, and she'd come right over to me. I'd click on the leash and make the person comfortable that the dog was not going to bother them. And as soon as the person walked on by, I would reach down, and she knew I was going to do that. I'd take the leash off, and she'd run ahead. And I always said that I looked up at the mountains, and she had her nose down, and we saw entirely different things. She smelled everything, and I could see everything. But when we went out for those walks, they were very different for each of us. But it was a wonderful time, and she kept me going. And after she died, I didn't walk anymore. And I thought that was good for my health to get out and walk with her, and an enjoyable time too. We were in Colorado, and the mountains were in full view, and I could just lift my chin up and see mountains all over the west, and walk on that path. Yep, Linzy was the pet of all pets. and Barbara never met Lindsay. It was Lindsay died, and then Marilyn died, and Barbara never met either one of them. But Barbara had a pet dog that I never met.
My dog's name was Cleo. We had her for 17 years. She was a schnoodle. So she was a little dog, a lap dog. And I, hadn't had pets except for a bird when I grew up. And I wasn't that fond of animals like a lot of people are. But my daughter Julie came home with this little fuzzy ball of a dog, little puppy. And she said, Mom, this puppy has been abused. The mom is kept outside and it was cold. It was freezing outside. And she had this litter of puppies, and this little puppy had its tail chewed off because they were hungry. I think we need to give this little dog a home. I says, oh, Julie, I'm not sure I want to do that. Well, then she went to her dad, Ivan, and showed Ivan the dog. And he says, oh, of course, we will take the dog. And so it was kind of Ivan's dog, but it was our dog. And we both really loved Cleo. And when Ivan got sick and was paralyzed for a year and a half, Cleo just really comforted him. She would jump up on his lap and he would hold her while he was taking a nap. And actually, when he came home from the hospital, he was in a wheelchair. And when she saw the wheelchair, she growled. She didn't know what that was, but she got used to it. And she lived for a full 17 years, and we really did love our Cleo.
Wow.
Yeah.
He died before I met Tom, so
Right.
he never saw
Both Ivan and the dog died, and Marilyn and Lindsay died, and we never knew each other's mates or even our pets. But when we met, we didn't have a pet, either one of us.
I actually wrote a little children's story about Cleo, just called The Story of Cleo, and illustrated it. My friend Kathy Kasperzak is an artist, and she took several photos that we have of Cleo, and she illustrated the little booklet.
Do you still have that?
I do.
So take some pictures of it and then scan it.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Okay, but this is a good place to finish up. We've covered most of the pets here. I'm sorry my video went out. You can't see me, but I'm still here. And a good place to end. So
okay.
Until next time.
Oh, I guess next time.
This is a good one.